Hi, and welcome to Still Evolving, where we explore the truth behind lasting performance and resilience. Rather than relying on perfection or superhuman ability, our conversation will highlight how real strength emerges through simple, intentional habits grounded in self-compassion, adaptability, and the ability to grow through life's inevitable setbacks. Today's guest is Adam Frank, Senior Vice President and General Manager for SugarCRM in the Asian Pacific region. With over 15 years of experience leading high-performing sales and delivery teams across Australia, Europe, and the U.S., Adam has built a career turning complex business challenges into real customer success stories. A consultant at heart, Adam focuses on understanding people before process, helping organizations grow by improving the way they serve and support their customers. At SugarCRM, he champions a platform many consider the best-kept secret in customer experience, helping companies create smoother, more meaningful interactions at every step of the customer journey. Also known for proving that serious business conversations can still benefit from a perfectly timed pun. I'm excited to welcome Adam to the show. Adam, welcome to Still Evolving. Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely, Dr. Amy. And thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm thrilled to be on.
Awesome. Well, why don't we just start off by giving you some time to share and reflect on your journey, what has motivated you along the way, and also sharing on what you're up to right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm one of those guys who, when I was a kid, I loved the idea of leading. I was like a school captain in school and loved the idea that I could have an impact upon my friends and their lives. And honestly, that value kind of just stuck with me as I entered the working world. So I was really fortunate to work in some small businesses that were uh, only willing to take advantage of young people who are keen to be ambitious and grow. So I still remember the first company I worked in, I had line management responsibilities at like 21, which for the record, it's probably a little bit too young to be doing that. Yeah, like I still remember managing somebody who was over twice my age. And transparently, that's been one of the sort of ongoing challenges for a lot of my life has been working in leadership and management roles where you're working with people who are actually far more experienced than you are. And they know their craft, they know their space much better than you ever will. And even now today, I know that the people in my team, the jobs that they do, the roles they fulfill, they're better at their jobs than I will ever be. And that's something I think is like a constant thread throughout many of my roles.
That is fantastic. Share a little bit about your leadership role now, Adam.
Sure. So I work for a software company called SugarCRM. I guess it's a little bit on the nose. You can kind of guess what we do from the name there, but uh, we're in mid-market, so we're not trying to solve problems for everyone. We recognize that there's a lot of big vendors out there, and my specific role is to run the go-to-market operations in the Asia Pacific region. I also carry a general management responsibility too, which principally means I look after, sales and delivery and a lot of functions kind of all ladder up to my responsibility. And we're not a huge team. I'm talking like less than 30 people all up, but it's certainly a fascinating and an exciting place to be. In fact, just today we had two new starters start, one in sales and one in delivery. And, it was quite an exciting thing to, running onboarding for multiple people and trying to really help take people on that journey as to what excites me to work for the place that I choose to work in. And I think for a lot of people, not everyone chooses to work in, a category leader. And I live in Australia. We love the underdog in Australia, working for a challenger brand has certainly got its exciting moments. And I love to sort of infuse my excitement and energy around that with people who are joining our team and are kind of at the starting end of their journey as well with us.
Super exciting for you. You reflected a bit about the leadership challenge that has come throughout your career, right? When you've been leading or managing those who may have significant more experience than you. What have you found that helps you with those perhaps one-on-one relationships or even the group relationship, the team relationship where you are the leader? You mentioned being 21 as a line manager, but when you are leading or managing the team, and what have you used to navigate those relationships?
I think honestly, the starting point is don't have ego. I very much believe in the people around me. And if I think back to that very first relationship I had with someone who was significantly older, and even now I'm still working with people who are more experienced, I start with that assumption that they can do their job better than me. They don't need me to tell them how to do their job better. And I think once you start with like an anchoring principle like that, and just sort of layer all of your coaching and one-on-ones with that as its central assumption, it really changes how you think about the leader and team member sort of dynamic and relationship. It means that when you run a team meeting, for example, you are absolutely not trying to be the smartest person in the room. I see my objective as going, all right, I've got 8 personalities in a room. Not everyone is an extrovert. Not everyone is trying to fill the air with the sound of their voice. My job is to figure out, okay, so and so over there has been being a bit quiet. How can I coax and bring them into the conversation? What's going through their mind as we talk about whatever topic we're getting into, and to try and create a bit of an amplifier for that type of a thing. And I think when leaders recognize that their role is not just to tell somebody else how to allegedly do their job better, but more find a way to amplify other people's strengths, the focus and dynamic shifts entirely. So that suddenly, I think, made it easier for me to build rapport with people who are better at their jobs than I am, and to be, I guess, quite successful in helping to grow those types of teams and to manage that transition. I think particularly now when we're hiring and we're looking for new people, it also means that during the interview process, I can be quite candid with people as to here's how a team meeting goes, here's how a one-on-one goes, and really give them a sense as to what's it going to be like when you're on my side of the fence.
It somewhat reminds me, Adam, we talk about in challenging conversations or in moments where we're receiving feedback that it may be hard to kind of take on or hear the power of the tool of the assumption of best intention. That in general, humans, the members of your team, aren't there to maliciously harm you or undermine the project or undermine the team. Maybe how they're going about delivering or what they're saying is not landing and having an impact that's different than their intention. But assuming that most of us are looking to help, that assumption can be incredibly powerful in those dynamics so that perhaps our guardedness can stay in check. We can stay in a position of curiosity or listening to understand. And so I appreciate you relating that from a leadership perspective and how you're overcoming this challenge that assuming, like, first of all, you wouldn't have hired them if they weren't competent and you didn't have the fundamental belief that they could execute and contribute the value in that role. And so coming back to that foundational reminder that, hey, they know their job, they know what they're doing.
And
It can be really, really helpful.
you've got it so right there as well to say that once you establish like a shared agreement about intentionality, it really focuses how all the subsequent dynamics play out. Like just last week, we were having some team workshops and really trying to help everyone build a greater culture of accountability and of, let's give feedback to one another. So at Sugar, one of our company values is in fact feedback as fuel. The idea that you should be energized by the feedback you get from other people. And the truth is, I think that as people grow, they often get less and less feedback, and it becomes a little bit cyclic. If you're not receiving it, it also means you're less able to receive it in the future. You kind of get a little bit stuck in your ways. So we had a whole session workshopping this out with the team to sort of help sort of like soften the muscle. Let's relax.
Yeah.
Let's get ourselves into it. But the starting statement was really, let's accept that we all want the best for one another. No one is here, as you say, no one's here to try and take you down a peg. What we want is to actually lift each other up. And sometimes it's so hard to lift yourselves up unless you have someone else point out the blind spots. And I think trying to sort of really build that mindset of going, we want to help each other makes that so much easier. And I guess coming back to point one of not having ego means I'm always going to start with, here's some weaknesses I've observed in myself. And let's open yourselves up to giving me some feedback first so that we all feel more comfortable giving feedback to one another in a more private sort of setting as well. And I think, again, when leaders can kind of acknowledge that the mistakes that they make are actually sometimes potentially the most visible and the most impacting, it actually means that you've got an opportunity as a leader to kind of share that, socialize that, and create that culture of let's give feedback to one another and figure out how to grow from there.
There's such power in being able to model that, because when we talk about openness to feedback, I think what gets left sometimes or just kind of jumped over quickly is that the person who may receive the feedback actually can open the door and model, just as you were describing, like, hey, this is what I'm aware of. What ideas do you have, and how I could do it differently, or what would be more impactful or help the team? And so when you come from that place of vulnerability and then make the direct ask, is very clearly giving permission for others to do the same. So huge power. And as a leader, being able to model how we can position ourselves in relationships so that we can get hopefully some real feedback that is helpful, that is useful in building our teams. I'm curious for you, when we talk about relationships, like what has helped you along the way in terms of mentoring, coaching? Like, talk about a little bit more like that power of connection that's helped you grow and evolve in your leadership roles.
Yeah, so I think I have had some good examples along the way of people who've kind of helped me think less about individual actions and more about what could somebody be. I think about some of my early bosses, and I don't necessarily even call them mentors or leaders, but they gave me advice along the way, which helped me kind of break myself out of my own box. And when you can kind of see yourself the way that somebody else can see you, and sort of take in like, we see this potential. We think you could do X or you could do Y. Suddenly you realize, oh, wow, well, I too should be looking at the people in my team and going, well, what can I imagine for such and such? How can I lift them out of their box? Because I think the truth is, oftentimes we do get a little bit stuck in our box. We only see our little well, and it's very difficult to have perspective. And I think one of the major responsibilities of a leader is to have that perspective and is to be able to say, look, you know what? I can see how you could take those skills from over here and then immediately transferable to something over there, which you may not even be able to realize is good for you, but is actually what's going to help you grow to that next stage. And I think leaders have always had that sort of mindset for anyone in their team in my mind of, what is the thing that I can do that could challenge you to get to that next stage? Hopefully that's something that we're in active engagement and conversation about anyways, to realize that you might have a PD plan. But honestly, if I think about some of the most monumental shifts that I went through personally, it was a boss pointing out directions that I could go that I wasn't even envisioning. The Adam at 23 had a certain career path of what he thought he was going to be doing. And a boss said to me, Adam, you could go down this. And I was looking at very technical roles back then. I was thinking I'll become a software development manager and then become an architect eventually, and then maybe a CTO one day. And he actually said quite early, he said, well, you know what? You enjoy talking a lot. You consider that there are a bunch of other roles that you could do, maybe more in consulting, that would leverage your interest in technology as well as your love of talking. And you might find something out there. And before that point, honestly, I'd never really given it much thought. And I did a little bit more thinking. I began speaking to people who were working as consultants and realized, you know what? I think I could actually do this. And he gave me a spot, gave me a chance to grow into an area that otherwise would not have been where I was actually going to go from a career. So that example in my own life, it really gave me the impetus to think, you know what? I need to look for those opportunities as well, because just as I lived in my box, there are people in my team who are as well.
Absolutely. And so grateful probably it's for his perspective and being able to see that and encourage you to take that shift to see what other opportunities were there for you. And it also sounds like within that there was actions of reflection from you, right? Like you taking the time to reflect on perhaps, and I don't want to put words, but really what was fulfilling, right? You made the joke liking to talk, but really being able to communicate and share directly, and having that a significant part of your role, whether it was in consulting or perhaps now leading multiple teams, that was huge. So I want to kind of turn to that this is not always an easy grind. Like this can wear you down. I'm curious, what has fueled you or sustained you along the way? Are there recovery practices that you find can help fill your tank up, or perhaps feel more grounded or refreshed so that you can maintain that flexibility? Right? Because when we get grounded, you talked about the box, right? we kind of fall back under stress to that which is most rehearsed. And that includes our mindsets and our how we make sense of the world, the challenge in front of us, etc. And so to be recovered also kind of sometimes extends greater flexibility. We can think more creatively. We can navigate tough conversations, hopefully more in a more skilled fashion. But it does take some offset of the load that our human systems are carrying. So what have you found that has helped you recover in the long grind?
So, given that most of my day job involves influencing people, there's an acceptance that people, humans, are the things that we can't control in life. And obviously, the things that you can't control are often what gives you stress. And what helps me as a starting point is to acknowledge that, to kind of go, you know what? Every day is going to be a huge challenge when there are things that you can't control. So let's accept that as a starting point and say, okay, I can't control those things. I can plan for them, I can have ideas, but ultimately I'm, beginning a domino effect that is going to go in weird and wonderful ways. So if I've accepted that about work, now I need to look outside of work to think, well, what are the areas that I can create control, some sense of peace or comfort? What are the things where I can demonstrate my agency? For me, I enjoy exercise. So I was very sporty growing up. At some point, I decided that getting injured in the basketball court was probably not the wisest choice for my future. And, I hung up my
Yes.
shoes, so to speak. But these days, I try to exercise probably about 4 or 5 times a week. And I've got set routines and things that I work on. But things like nutrition, things like exercise, things like making sure that you're getting out in front of the sunlight and working on your vitamin D, these are all things which are so controllable, right? So as humans, we know what we put into our bodies. We know how much exercise we do. We know, like, you're going to do more of this or less of that. And all of that is controllable. And it does give me a general sense of calm. And honestly, I find it crazy sometimes. I work for a software company that's owned by private equity. So it is literally meant to be the most stressful type of sales roles that are out there. But truthfully, I'm probably the most calm and healthy that I've probably ever been for life because as my roles have become more stressful, I have taken my health more and more seriously. And I can see all the stats side of it. Like there's a numbers part of me that analyzes this stuff. And I go, wow, it's incredible that these things have both gone up in somewhat linear directions. And that's probably where the balance has come from. Because just as intensely as I'm applying myself to work, I apply myself to being serious about taking my health in an important sort of direction.
So appreciate you underscoring the power that really comes from wellness being the foundation of performance. And just the observation that you noticed that as you grew and took on positions of greater perhaps responsibility or stress, that as you also attended to that which is in your control, your well-being, you were able to come meet that load that we carry and those demands. It's funny. I was talking to Drew Davis, who is American. He's retired now, but he played football in college at Oregon and then went on to the NFL. And he reflected back kind of a lesson learned that he took from playing for Coach Chip Kelly, and Chip Kelly really challenging them and reminding them that there's two things that are free: sleep and hydration, right? Like find the water. And it's remarkable, right? Sometimes I think, especially when we're talking about high performance in private industry, there's still the hacks or the next fun cool way, cool tool, platform, texting thing, or AI tool. And really, when it comes down to it, getting back to basics, the simple intentional habits you referenced too, that are 100% in your control. We can't control other people's choices, other people's behaviors, but certainly coming back and looking in the mirror and asking ourselves, what's one thing I can do to take care of my human system today, mind, body, spiritually, that really can provide that rock solid foundation to be able to meet the demands that we all are facing. So thank you very much. You're speaking my language. And sharing that one. In wrapping up, we do want to leave the audience with one immediate actionable takeaway, a tool or strategy. What piece of advice that you would be willing to share, something that you find in your day-to-day routine really has helped you perhaps either ground or respond through adversity as a leader?
I think positive affirmations, is one of those things that we often take for granted because particularly as your roles get more and more stressful, I think that, and particularly as you become more senior in your roles, there are less people out there who are going to praise you. But the people who praise me the most, it's going to sound weird. My wife, obviously, my number one fan. And number two is probably me. And I think we are probably the people who praise me the most because I know I, as a leader, don't hear that enough. And I would be willing to bet that most senior leaders do not hear enough praise. What they hear is challenge and criticism and things they need to do better in because no one's perfect at their job. Let's just accept that. So
Yes.
if you can't be your number one fan, well, then who will be? So for many of us, you might have a significant life partner who will be that number one fan for you. But
Right.
we've got to also be responsible for that ourselves. And I think beginning your day with the degree of affirmation and kind of acknowledging, like, hey, I've got this. I've got to this role. I was able to do these things. I can actually think through this. I can build that next financial plan. I can design this particular structure. I can run that really challenging one-on-one that's coming up. And I think repeating those types of things to ourselves, I do very much believe in that idea that if you say it often enough, you will believe it and your actions begin to echo what you have been saying. You know, Negative chat, talking
So
down to yourselves, or just absorbing the challenges that you might receive from other people who are more critical. There's a point where, again, you will internalize that and then your actions will start to reflect that instead. So I'd encourage everyone, look for ways to make sure that the encouragement that you're hearing outweighs what you might be getting from outside yourself and outside of your home.
appreciate that. I think it's a helpful reminder. Oftentimes we look, and like you said, some people have life partners who can really kind of help provide that support. But as leaders, it can be kind of a barrage of negativity, if you will. And some people go perhaps and go and hire a coach where they could also fuel the supportive content and challenge as well. But we all have control over that ideal coach, which is our inner coach, right? Like, how are you coaching yourselves today? You may need a little push, you may need a little challenge, you may need a little reminder of instruction, like what to do. But commonly we need a coach who says, you've got this. To your point, a reminder that, hey, I am prepared. I wouldn't be in this role if I haven't demonstrated some skills that I could use to execute on this problem. So I very much appreciate the healthy reminder of what are you saying to yourself, about the interactions with others, or about even the future that you're wrestling, your inner coach. Absolutely. Adam, thank you so much for this conversation. I know down under the time is very different than where we are here in the US. And so it is not lost on me that it is a bit later in the evening. So thank you very much for sharing back, and always a pleasure. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Amy. Really appreciate being on today. Thank you.